This is Sallie Bengtson. I'm the president of NOLA Blue Records, and you're listening to Talking Blues.
Sally, you come from a musical background, or your family has a musical background, classically trained. Can you talk a little bit about your family?
Yes, absolutely. I grew up in a family surrounded by classical music. My grandfather was a vocalist, and he would always have my memories are of Saturday mornings going to spend time at my grandparents' house, and my grandfather would have his voice students and my grandmother would play the piano for the lessons, and my younger brother and I were sort of sectioned off to another part of the house to play quietly, but that was the soundtrack of um, my early years. In addition to that, my mother and father both have their master's degrees in sacred music. So they're trained church organists, choir directors. They actually met at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. So that was also a big part of my childhood. Saturday mornings before going to my grandparents, my dad would often take my brother and I into the church and let us play on the organ and find out what the different stops sounded like to make the different noises that the organ could make and see what a powerful instrument it is. So I was definitely surrounded by classical music all my life.
Okay, so your brother, I understand, went into music, teaching music.
Yes.
Did you ever pursue music? Did you play any instruments?
Any instruments? Well, of course I played piano. I was interested in that. I wanted to take lessons. However, I would say that I was competent, but it didn't come as naturally or as powerfully for me as it did for my brother, he's younger than I am, and he just took off and left me left me in the dust. But I had many years of lessons, classical training, and then I also played the flute for a while. So I have the appreciation of what it takes to study the theory and the performance and the practice and all that goes with it. But I never actually pursued it professionally. No.
Musically, what were you listening to when you were growing up?
Well, so that's very interesting because I was a teenager in the 80s. So that was the whole British pop invasion, and that's sort of what I first learned about. I'm not one of those people that can say, "Oh, I grew up listening to my parents' collection of whatever," because that was not the case.
But it was all around you.
I had it right. So I mean, yes, I grew up listening to my dad's organ recitals and and the symphony concerts that my parents would attend and that sort of thing. But as far as popular music that I listened to, it was sort of following my friends and what was on the radio and what was popular at that time. So it was the British invasion, and then as I got to my college years, I got into rap music a bit, which is way different than the rap music that my 17-year-old son listens to today. But anyway, that was my popular musical background in my youth, growing up.
I'm curious as to your impressions of the lives of people who perform music or who are in the music field, like your grandparents, like your parents.
Mhm.
What impressions do they leave you about being an artist or being a musician?
That's a great question, and I think that ties in very strongly to my life today and my work today, because I know how hard it is to be a performing musician. you can be the most skilled and polished performer and never achieve the recognition that you're worthy of receiving and achieving. It's a very competitive um, vocation, and it's also often for most there's not a lot of money in it. It's a passion, it's a calling, it's something that just it's part of who you are. So I that all of that knowledge and that background is very it's second nature for me, knowing that that's we grew up and my parents raised my brother saying, this is wonderful that you're so passionate about performing, but what's your backup plan? How are you going to keep the lights on and put food on the table? And he's been successful in that. I mean, his role as a professor allows him to both, put food on the table but also perform. So he's been very fortunate, but many aren't. Many aren't. They struggle.
So before you started this record label,
Mhm.
you went to school for business management.
Correct.
What did you have in mind at that point? What were you hoping to achieve or become with that degree?
Well, that's also an interesting question because my family background is music, but it's also business because we had a family baking business, wholesale baking business. And so I was the first member of the fourth generation to work at that business. I started when I was 16 and I worked there through age 26 when we sold the business. But at the time when I was in college, my thought was, okay, this is going to be mine someday, and I need to know what I'm doing. I need to be prepared, and I loved it. I felt very attached to it. And my musical family is also my business family as an aside.
Right.
So my father, it's the business is on my mother's side. But when my father and mother got married and they started their lives as church organists, my grandfather was really impressed by how much my dad could do with so little income that they had, quite frankly, and said, I want you to come and work at our business. I see you've got skills and talents. And so yeah, so that was my plan. That was my motivation, was I was going to do big things for my family's business.
So when they decided to sell the business, were you part of that decision? Or was that like, oh no, what am I going to do now?
That was my dad and my uncle were running the business at that time, and I was in charge of. We had 1,100 employees. So
Wow.
yes, it was 5 states, 1,100 employees, labor unions. I mean, the whole 9 yards. So I was handling all of the insurance and the retirement plans, the workers' compensation, that sort of thing. I That was my focus in the human resources area. So I understood the reasoning for it, but I was not part of the decision. No.
So what did you do next?
Well, I was offered the opportunity to stay, but it was too emotionally difficult for me to stay because it was really one of our biggest competitors that we sold to. And I just thought, no, I think that the thrill is gone and it's time to move on. So, so that really began a series of jobs for me, sort of building off of my human resources background. I did some work in staffing and human resources at a bank and that sort of thing. I even dabbled for a bit in health insurance group sales, but I really couldn't find my passion back. Like it upended. I know why my family sold, and it was the right thing for us and it was the right thing for the business, but it upended me and it took me a while to really find where I belonged.
And where you belong, is that the record company or did something else come before that?
Oh, undeniably, I am where I belong today. There's no doubt, and I'm so grateful. But no, what happened in the interim is I got married and I had my son, and that was also something that was very. I knew I wanted to be a mom. I love children, and I that was something that was really important for me. And I thought at the time, well, my experience being a mom to a small child was different than than what I expected, only in the fact that I literally cut my teeth in the business world. I mean, I started when I was 16 at my family's business, and then I wasn't really happy as a college student. So I finished my college degree at night because I wanted to keep working full time. I mean, business just attracted me that much. I loved it. So being at home with a small child, I, it didn't take me too long before I realized how much I missed being out in the business world. As much as I loved being a mom, I missed that other part of me. So I came up with the sort of the timing presented itself. I had been taking my son to a class. It's kind of like a mommy and me class. The Gymboree Corporation does play and music classes. And we loved it. It was a great experience for both of us. And the local franchise came up for sale. And I thought, this is it. This is perfect. You know, I'll start my own business again. I'll be emotionally invested. I can bring my son into work. I can, this is fantastic. So that's what I did. And my son was 3 at the time. So it was a great experience. I learned so much. And what I really learned was the confidence in myself that, there's always kind of a, when you work for your family and you work for a big company, there's always kind of a, well, that's the boss's daughter. She just, whatever. And so, even though I knew for myself that I was a hard worker and a capable worker, this was my chance to really show myself that I could do it on my own, just me. So that's what I did. And it was great. It was a very good experience. However, demographically speaking, I live in central Pennsylvania, which is a very rural area. Um, and there just wasn't enough business to continue to sustain it at a profitable level. So after I had the business for about 2 years, I realized that there wasn't a long-term future in it. So I made the decision to close the franchise. Um, but that sets the whole stage for where I am today.
Can you just tell me in a high level overview what that entailed, that business? What did you have to do in order to run that business?
Sure. Well, so as a franchise, certainly there's a whole framework provided by the corporation that we have to follow as independent franchisees. So I had to handle everything from the marketing to the staffing to the payroll to the advertising and really to running the classes. So I was out on the play floor teaching the moms and interacting with the babies and cleaning the center, keeping it was nonstop. It was pretty much everything, really. I mean, I had a staff, but it was a small staff, and so really the buck stopped with me. It was pretty much all facets of the operation.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this later because I'm curious as to what that experience, how it helped you in what you do today. But before we get to that, I guess going back in time, you met Benny Turner at some point. How did that
Yes,
happen? Because I think he is like the catalyst for what happened. But it sounded like
yes,
you knew him before, and then you kind of caught
yes,
up with him, and then things started to change. Can you explain that?
absolutely. Sure. So going back to when I worked in my family's business, I came of age, turned 21, while I was working there. And one of the people that worked for us sang in a blues band. So a friend of mine said, "Hey, let's go out and hear his band play." And me being the 21, 22, whatever I was at the time, said the traditional, almost typical response, "Well, I don't know if I want to go hear blues. That sounds depressing." So, right? So here I am, the poster child for, you know, that sounds depressing. She said, "Oh, no, 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 no. You'll love it. Trust me." I said, "All right. Well, okay, sure." So I went, and that night I was hooked. It took one night of feeling that music and hearing it, and it was nothing that the name blues, nothing that I was predisposed to thinking about. It was just, it literally, that one night I just became obsessed, and I started looking at the music, trying to find the music that I heard, who sang this, and what's this about, and I just started digging, and through that, I that was in Reading, Pennsylvania, and we had a Reading Blues Fest, and it wasn't long after that at the Reading Blues Fest, Tinsley Ellis and Kenny Neal came to perform, and they both, again, I was like a sponge. I mean, I was just, I couldn't get enough. So one of Tinsley's main influences was Freddie King. So I was hearing Freddie King, and it didn't take me long to find Freddie King, and just, oh, that I loved Freddie King, couldn't get enough. So through a mutual friend, as you know, I'm sure the blues community is small. It doesn't take long to get to know people and run into them at events and things. So I met a friend who now works for me, works with me. It's amazing, the path of all of this. And she and I shared a mutual love of New Orleans. And at one point, she said to me, "You do know that Freddie King's brother lives and plays in New Orleans, right?" And I said, "What? What?" I had no idea. None. So she lived in New York at the time, and he was the band leader for Marva Wright. And they were playing at a festival in Philadelphia. So she said, "I'm going to come visit you. Let's go. You have to meet him." And that was, again, that was in my early 20s. And the another thing that I love, and I have always loved about the blues world, is that the musicians are so accessible. They're just, it's not like being in a big arena and so far removed. You really get to talk to them and learn about them and know their story. And that's what happened with Benny. He became a really good friend, that I would see often when I would go to New Orleans. Because in those days, I was young and free and flexible, and any chance I got, I would go to New Orleans. So that's how our friendship
So you
developed.
have this friendship with him. You close the jamboree, um,
Hmm.
and then you go down to New Orleans again,
Hmm.
and you meet up with Benny, and he
Yes.
tells you about what he's been working on and what he's doing, and this
Hmm.
evolves into you suggesting maybe he work on a book, or is that the correct
Yeah.
sequence?
Yes, that's correct. He, I guess I forgot one of one of the major things that I did. Just before I got married, I worked for a beauty education company, and I got pulled into working on a series of textbooks for cosmetology students. So I learned a little bit in the course of that. I learned a little bit about books and publishing and that sort of thing. So when I met back up with Benny, this was in 2012. It was when I closed the business and the Gymboree business. And I was also sadly going through a divorce at that time. So my whole world was upended, and the future was sort of a blank canvas and a little bit of a, oh gosh, what am I going to do
Now,
next?
does the world look bright to you or does it look dark to you at that point? Is there full potential or is it a dark cloud over you?
I'd say it was a combination of
Okay, which
both.
makes sense.
I mean, yeah, I was pretty disheartened. I was very disheartened by my personal situation. Um, and wanting to do something for myself that would also help me to be the best mom I could be for my little child. I had a small
Right.
child at that time. Um, so in that aspect, yeah, I was pretty it was a dark period, but and that's kind of what took me to New Orleans. It was like, you know what, I need to reboot. I need to go to my happy place. I need to just start the new year. It was New Year's Eve, that time of year, end of year. Start the new year fresh. So I went to New Orleans, spent a couple days, and it wasn't my normal New Orleans experience. It wasn't going from show to show and this and that. You know, I got there and I thought, gosh, I really can't run away from myself anymore. I've gotten too old. My problems have gotten much bigger. And so it was more of a contemplative time. And when I visited with Benny, I found out that he was kind of in a challenging time too. He had lost Marva Wright not too long ago and sort of was struggling to he figured, well, I guess at this point I need to forge my own way now and just start my own band and make my own career happen. And so I knew he was in a transition and so it was just all these things just started marinating in my mind and I don't know, it just hit me on the plane ride home. I thought, I've always said to him, he's got these amazing stories and this amazing history. He should write a book. And I thought, and he'd always say, well, who's going to write my book? I can't do it. You know, who? So I got home and I called him and I said, Benny, I got it. I'm going to write your book. What do you think? And to my surprise, he said, let's do it. I was just, wow. So he's very private. He's a very quiet, private, introverted. For being a performer, he's quiet. So I wasn't sure that he would go for it, but I said, "Look, I've got a corporation in place that I had for the franchise. So I've got a structure in mind, you know, and in place. We can just I'll pivot into a different line of business." So he embraced the idea. He said, and to my surprise, he said, okay, well, we need to go to Texas and I need to show you where it all started. I need to show you where Freddie and I grew up. And then we have to go to Chicago and I have to show you, you know, when we arrived in Chicago, what it was like and where we lived and the places that we went. And I was like, okay. It was so exciting and so it was just what I needed when I needed it. And that's what began the shift into where I am
Okay.
today.
But before you get to where you are today, I mean, even though you had this corporation set up,
Hmm.
named after your cat, I presume, um, what is that? Like you basically becoming a writer, a ghostwriter for him, or was it more than that? When you proposed the book, were you thinking about actually publishing the book, or were you actually being the writer for the book?
So my business name, Nola Blue, was really, I had named my corporation, I needed a corporation to run the
Right.
franchise. And when my attorney asked me, that's what sort of fell out of my mouth. New Orleans, my favorite place, and blues, my favorite music. So it was sort of foretelling of the future, I think, of where I was supposed to be. But yes, my thought was that I could be the writer. Um, but as Benny and I started to talk and visit some of these places, and I was recording everything and taking videos and doing what I could, he got to a point, and to his credit, he said, my memory is not, this is a lot of years to cover. And he said, I think I need some help filling in some of the historic musical holes and piecing things together. So that's when we decided to bring Bill Dahl into the equation. And that was such a gift, because Bill's knowledge is so vast.
Hmm.
And Benny loved talking to him because if he couldn't remember someone, 9 times out of 10, Bill remembered, or Bill could track it down and tell him about it and help him fill in the blanks. So, what ended up happening was after Benny and I took the initial field trips, I guess you could call them, he spent many, many hours on the phone with Bill, just talking and going over his history. And then Bill prepared transcripts from that, which I then took and I would sit with Benny and go over it to put it into his voice. Because he would say, I would never say that. Like that doesn't sound like me. And so we sort of take the content and then change it and make sure it was sounding like Benny's voice. And people have said that it really, it's like a conversation with him, and it just feels like you're sitting at the table with him.
How comfortable were you as a writer? Because you've mentioned all the things you've done and even worked for a publishing company, but I don't know if you had experience in writing other than the corporate work that you would have done. So, how
Mhm.
confident were you as an author at that point?
I I think just my comfort level was from what I had learned and done in school, just researching a subject and then presenting it. I don't think I wouldn't have comfort with fiction writing for sure. But in terms of just hearing a story and capturing it and rewriting it, I felt pretty good about it because it was collaborative. If it was just me, I think I would have been intimidated by that. But because I had my writing subject right there with me, um, I enjoyed it. I really
Okay,
did.
so as somebody who has a business background and who has
Hmm.
run businesses, did you have an end goal or a goal you're working towards with this book? Like, did you think, okay, when we finish this, we should hopefully sell X number of copies? Or, like, did you think of it in any kind of a business sense? Or was it more of, we're involved in this is what I believe in, and we're just going to go straight ahead with it?
So it was, yes, it was definitely led by my heart and my passion more than crunching the numbers of what it all meant. At at that particular point in time, I was able to just run with it and follow my heart. So the business part of it came in when, during the conversations with Benny, I learned that he had an album underway, but he had run out of money to finish it. It was close, but not enough to put it over the finish line. And that's when the light bulb went off for me. And I said, Benny, you need to finish this album because that's going to be the vehicle to get you more gigs, get you on the road. And when you're on the road, that's going to help you sell the books. So that's how I ended up releasing my first album on Nola Blue Records, was out of, you know, writing the book. Oddly as that may be, we released his album Journey in 2014, and his book did not come out until 2017.
Did the book? Did you always plan to publish the book yourself, or were you gonna shop it around, or how did that work?
That I wasn't sure. I mean, I assumed that I would, well, so backing up, when we got Benny's album finished, I didn't know what to do with it. But he kind of knew what to do just from talking to other musicians. And he said, "You there's this place called CD Baby. Why don't you look it up? See what you can find out." So I looked up CD Baby, and we used them to release his Journey album. So, in the course of that, I also learned that CD Baby had a partnership site called Book Baby, and you could essentially do the same thing. So I just thought, well, okay, we put his book out ourselves or his CD out ourselves. We can put his book out ourselves too. And that's what we did. So, and I think that, I had talked back and forth with Bill about it and what made the most sense. And, his advice to me was that he knew I had pictures that I wanted to include and formats that I wanted to do. And he said, the downside of getting a publisher is that you're going to lose some of that, or you're likely to
Right.
lose some of that creative direction. And I didn't want to do that. So we just ran with it ourselves.
Okay, so those are two major things to take on
Yeah.
to to publish a book and to release and to establish a record company.
Yes.
When you released the record, did you have any sense of, once again, with your background, did you have any sense of a 5-year plan or goal to achieve?
No, I was still in my following my heart phase. I was just in a, this feels good. This works. I can manage this while my son is in school, and I'm using my abilities and my interests and my passion for the music, and it's all just kind of working. So I'm just gonna sit in this space for a little bit because it feels good. Quite honestly, that's where I was at that time.
Okay, so having the background that you
Hmm.
had, and then going into a very different world of the blues and the music industry, what was the thing that surprised you the most?
I think that the definitely the very, very, very small profit margin was a big surprise. Certainly this wasn't the ideal time to get involved with the music business. And I didn't know that at the time, but I quickly learned. I quickly learned what I was dealing with, and what the whole industry is dealing with. So and that's frankly been a journey for me throughout the entire, now I'm in my 11th year, um, trying different things that I thought would work to to bring more income and offset some of the issues and the challenges. And so that's been a moving target that I'm continually trying to unlock the key to um, sustainability and even profitability in this very challenging business of music.
I mean, it was challenging 11 years ago. It's probably way more challenging 11 years
It
later.
is.
And it's in a moving target because things always seem to be changing.
Yes.
But at what point, was there a point in those 11 years that, I mean, obviously you're continuing to do it and you're continuing to release more
Hmm.
stuff. You've released quite a few already. Was there a milestone that you reached and you thought, oh, like, not that you've made it, but that you've reached a goal that you were surprised by?
Well, definitely, my 10-year anniversary felt very reaffirming and like a milestone and an achievement. Um, I think that more recently, it's been sort of a really interesting turn of events. We have a new release coming out in July from Maria Muldaur, and getting an email that Maria was interested in talking to me about an album was definitely a moment where I felt like, okay, this is really something, and the fact that the album that she wanted to release was in honor of her mentor, Victoria Spivey, who was a female label owner years and years and years and years ago, that has been really quite a milestone and um, a great experience for me, and a feeling that I'm still on the right path. I don't know what the future of the path looks like, but I'm definitely making my way.
Is there any chance you could explain to me how much the business has changed in the last 11 years? Obviously, the pandemic had a huge effect on the business, and the world has changed in general from before the pandemic to after. But in your view, as a person running a record label, how has it changed in those 11 years?
I mean, there have been so many things that have changed. Just even I was talking to my friend Deborah, who introduced me to Benny all those years ago. Um, we were talking about just the mere fact of CDs used to be in plastic jewel cases when we started, and now we're using cardboard envelopes, um, ecologically better, lighter
Mm-hmm.
weight. So the formatting, the packaging, the fact that CDs are no longer as desirable as vinyl. So vinyl's back, which is just like mind blowing. I do myself. I had vinyl as a teenager, so that's kind of fun to see it coming back. But we've got that. But the whole streaming and just digital world it continues to present more and more challenges. Streaming in itself, of course, has taken a ton of revenue out of everyone's pocket. Um, the artists, I should say, artists and labels. Um, but now we've got artificial intelligence to contend with on top of everything else. And how does that impact intellectual property? And how can you discern what's real and what's being sampled and copied? And I mean, it's just the list goes on and on. And it's overwhelming. I mean, I think it's overwhelming to all of us as individual people, let alone business owners.
You talked about the blues community being small, but a community that you get to know people very quickly.
Yes.
When you first started in this business, were you able to go to other labels and pick their brains or talk to them about what to do, how to go about it?
I did not, and I don't know if that's stubbornness or insecurity or a little bit of both. But I did a lot of research, and I did it my way. That's all I can say. I just followed my instincts and what I could learn on my own.
When the business is changing constantly,
Hmm.
how do you set goals? How do you say, you know, I don't know if you have like a 1 year plan,
Hmm.
a 3 year plan, or a 5 year plan, but do you work around plans as such?
Well, that's very interesting because as a small, very small label, um, I'm learning that I need to take time to step away to really think about where I'm going. It's very easy to get caught up in the day to day and the emails and the tasks and everything, and time just ticks away. So I'm really starting to dig into that a lot more. And I think my 10-year anniversary was a break in time that sort of initiated some of that thinking as well. What's the next decade going to look like? I recently met with someone who is a very successful entrepreneur on a large scale, and he surprised me by saying he does 6 month check-ins on his business. I mean, I had always thought about an annual review, but 6 months, that's really been sitting in my head a lot. Like, and the fact of how quickly the music industry is changing, I think there's definitely some wisdom in that. And here we are in June, 6 months into into the year. So note to self, it's time to sit and think a little bit. But yeah, I'm definitely in a position right now where frankly my thought process is how can I bring the most benefit to the artists in the next decade. So that goes back to my family and me knowing what it means to be a musician and all that is involved with it. And so as I watch the landscape changing constantly and the profitability shrinking constantly, um, I say to myself, okay, is it valuable to continue releasing music, helping artists release their music? Does it make more sense to try to go into more of an artist management role where I can help steer the whole ship? Do I do a little bit of both? I don't know. I'm wrestling with that because I love the process of bringing musical projects to life. I love I love hearing the stories behind the music, how it came about, packaging that up and then sharing it with the world. I mean, that's a sustaining gift of art that's out there for eternity. And that's really special to me to have a part of that. But I think about how many artists, especially the artists who have been in the industry for so long, are just baffled with what to do, how to manage all this technology, how to just survive at this stage in their careers. And there's a big part of me that wants to help with that too. So that's kind of where I am right at this very moment in time, is wrestling with that whole concept.
Is it correct to assume that you're managing Benny? Like, I
Yes.
is a manager. So, do you manage other artists as well?
I've tried, and it's hard. It's too. I'm helping um, to manage Trudy Lynn. I'm working with her longtime manager, Steve Crace, because he started a new business and he's just said, Sally, can you help me? I can't do it all anymore. So with her being on my label, there's certainly benefit to doing that. But no, as a rule, I'm not. Just because there's only so much time, and I think it's like a fork in the road. Benny, obviously, he's I'll manage him as long as he's with us. Um, but no, other than that, I really don't.
I mean, it's an interesting time because music has been devalued to a certain
Yes.
degree, and at the same time, people are still listening to a lot of music. Music is important. I think artists need to create. That's what they
Mhm.
do. It's hard to cost justify going in to make a decent album in a decent studio
Yes.
and with the costs associated to that and not be able to make that money back in some ways. I mean, there's certainly artists out there who are still selling CDs
Yes.
who, for whatever reason,
Yes.
they have a stage presence that
Mhm.
attracts people to buy the CDs afterwards.
Yes.
But not everybody's like that. And But I totally get why musicians have to create.
Hmm.
And so it's an interesting thing. Is there, how do you go about choosing the artists that you work with? Because I presume just by the nature of having a label in this day and age, you get a lot of offers. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people say, "Can you release my
Yes.
album?" So how do you decide on what to take on, what not to take on?
That's becoming a quite a large challenge for me, because yes, the volume is just going up exponentially. And that's a hard thing for me because I want to take on so much more than I should take on. I think certainly above, top line is the musicianship and the quality of the artist and the music that's being presented. But for me also, it has to mean something to me, because I I'm not just churning out music for someone just said to me, I just signed Mud Morganfield, Muddy Waters' oldest son, and they were saying, you're not like corporate blues. You're more grassroots. You care. And that's true. So it's gotta mean something to me because I'm gonna be working on it intimately, very involved with it. But then is there a story involved that I feel like I can present, and or is it just, well, here's my new record? I tend to be more towards the story side of it, and what's the background, what are we marketing and putting out and sharing. So that's my been my guideline. But I've always sort of prided myself in saying, well, I don't I'm not going to just sign people that are touring all the time because I want to give more people opportunities. But the longer I do this, and the more I see the reality, that is a big reality, is what kind of a fan base do they have? What
Mm-hmm.
kind of potential do they have to grow their existing fan base? Um, you know, the heart only lasts for so long, and you have to also start balancing the realities, and that's I'm definitely deep into looking at the realities of how to make the next 10 years work for sure.
What's the favorite thing that you do?
Hmm. I think my favorite thing is the putting the release together, the coordinating the packaging, the liner notes, bringing it from this abstract, listening to the streams, talking to the artist, and bringing it into form and seeing it when it arrives and looking at it like there's I don't know, there's nothing like it. I still get excited when I get the notice that I have the boxes have arrived at at the post office. It's like each new project is this exciting new, it's like a new birth of a new child, that you're releasing into the world. I love that. I love that process. And then hearing from the artist when they get it and they're just like thrilled, and then watching it go. It's just I love it.
You mentioned Mud Morganfield. Is there any others that you can talk about? Any future plans that we should be aware
Any
of?
other signings? Um,
Yeah.
there is one which will be, you can look for that announcement in the fall. We're not quite
Okay.
quite there yet. That's a release that's coming in 2026. Um, but
Do you have a number in mind, like in terms of how many you want to release a year, or does it would not work that way?
I I try to limit it to six, like an every other month kind of a thing. Um, Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not, but that's a manageable number, if not a high number. But that's what I'm trying to, and maybe even starting to taper lower than that. But that's generally what I'm looking at.
I mean, that's quite a impressive number. And how many releases do you have now?
Well, on Nola Blue, we have about 40 albums and then singles on top of that. But then I also have another label, Momojo Records, which is a distribution label, and there are, I mean, I all total, I have well over 100 releases in my catalog.
Wow. And that's in 11 years. That's quite
Thank
impressive.
you.
Do you remember the moment when you thought, yeah, this is a great idea. I'm glad I did this?
I, um, I think when Benny's Journey CD first came out, and I started to see what was happening in his career, his emerging career as a frontman. I mean, he had a long career as a sideman, but I saw the impact it had on him as a person, the validation and the like, wow, I can do this too. I can be a front person, and I can take charge of my career. That moment very, very early on made me realize that I wanted to do that for more artists than just Benny, because I knew, from my own family background, that where there's one, there's hundreds. And so, yeah,
Okay, my final question is, speaking about that validation, tell me about what this whole experience has done for you.
for me, first of all, it feeds my blues, um, my passion for the blues, on a daily basis. I'm overflowing. So I'm right in the place that I want to be. Um, but I think that, my business background is being fulfilled. I'm certainly using those skills. But there was a time after my family's business was sold that I thought I wanted to be a social worker. Um, and I did start to pursue that, but different life things interfered. But in some ways, I kind of feel like I'm a social worker today, um, because I have personal relationships with our artists, and they call me with their problems and their issues and their challenges, and it feels good, if not overwhelming sometimes, but it feels good to be able to help, give back, and be part of the lives of the people who make this music that is, it just feeds my soul. So being part of that, and even just being part of the music itself, which then goes out and feeds lots of souls, it's pretty cool. I'm very, very grateful to have somehow ended up here. And I definitely have moments going, wow, how did this all happen? You know, but knowing that I'm right where I want to be, and I think where I'm helpful, and I should be, and it just fills me. I don't know what else to say.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think, we talked about this. I've heard musicians talk about you and what a special person you are. And I think that speaks the world to what you do and what you've accomplished. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
My pleasure.